So, as we usually do, let's open up with a round of intros for everyone. Would love to hear kind of three things. One, who you are. Second, role at the company. And then three, what you guys are focused on. We start here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Luca. I'm the CEO and one of the two founders of the M0 project. M0 wants to be the leading developer-oriented stablecoin infrastructure in the world. So anybody who wants to control their dollar stack in whatever application they're developing, they can do this on M0 with full programmability, yield streaming, shared liquidity, and much more. And I'm also a DeFi nerd, so nice meeting you all.
Hi all, Steve Pack, CEO and co-founder of Rock Solid. We're a liquid vault platform. We give users single-click access to the best risk-adjusted returns in DeFi. We just launched 6 weeks ago with the Rocket Pool protocol, so we're the official liquid vault for the RETH token. In that 6 weeks, we've seen $25 million worth of inflows, and so it's an exciting time to be here and talking to you all, and thanks for hosting us, Chunda.
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. My name is Gytis. I'm COO at MEV Capital, and MEV Capital is a digital asset manager deploying market-neutral yield strategies on a set of underlying assets on-chain. And currently, we manage around $1.4 billion through fund wrappers, private portfolios, SMAs, and on-chain vaults.
Hey everyone, my name is Benjamin. I'm the founder of Cap. We're a fully insured private credit engine on top of the dollar.
Fantastic. For those who aren't aware, my name is Chunda, one of the co-founders of Paxos Labs. We focus on basically expanding some of the base Paxos capabilities. We're an initiative that spun out recently. Building out infrastructure around on-chain finance and providing it to some of the largest enterprises in the world. So let's jump in. First thing I want to kind of dive into is I have questions for you, Gytis and Steve, specifically around the context of this idea of vault management and platforms. For those who aren't aware in the audience, vaults are basically smart contracts that allow you to custody and manage funds on chain. And there's kind of this role of two different kind of, I'd say, stakeholders. One is the platform, like Rock Solid, who actually builds out these vaults and deploys them. And then two are the managers, like MEV, who actually curate these different strategies. So as vault managers and platforms, how do you guys do an analysis on what assets you want to focus on settling in from a risk perspective, especially focusing with this context of an institutional audience? How have you thought about your collateral underwriting strategy, and how's the strategy evolved over time, or is going to evolve over time as you service a more, let's call it, enterprise or institutional audience?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, there's kind of three pillars that you need to take a look in terms of an asset. So basically, it's technical implementation, collateral mechanism, proof of reserves, minting and burning functionalities, whether they're public and permissionless, or whether they're private, or there's only liquidity on chain. Then, of course, another factor is the market parameters, I would say, because in order, especially if you want to do a leverage strategy, there should be a sufficient liquidity on chain for you to exit if you need to, right? And then the third, obviously, is the market opportunity, because the strategy, in terms of the yield profile, it should make sense. Where I think we're going to see a lot of changes is like tracking of the collateral mechanism or the backing of an asset or an ERC for 6-to-6 vault in real time. Because recent events regarding Stream Finance, Elixir, basically showcase the interconnectedness of these asset backings or vaults, which kind of create a systemic risk if they're not tracked in real time, because different assets and different vaults have exposure to the same asset, and then a few unethical actors can basically put that systemic risk into effect, which sends ripples across the whole DeFi landscape. So I think where the industry is going to go is to be able to reconcile these assets versus their total supply in real time whenever a new asset is minted or redeemed, and to try to quantify these underlying risks to be sure that the vault risk is managed properly.
Yeah, I think it's maybe worth even, sometimes worth defining a vault. You gave a good definition, Chunda, but we have this thing in crypto, DeFi, we tend to use vault for everything. Yeah. So there's like, a morpho vault, right, where it's just which markets are you allocating to, is a curator allocating to, and there you're not having to think all the details about bridging, protocol, whatever, it's morpho. Whereas if you're running a more liquid vault like ours, where it could be any chain, any protocol, like it just depends on the mandate, yeah, then it's the whole stack of what's the tech stack in terms of the protocol, the bridging, the chain, how long has it been in market, all of those things. When it comes to the collateral itself, yeah, obviously, I'd add to everything Gytis said, and we've just got this perfect example of Stream, right, where I think when that started blowing up, everyone went and looked like, okay, what was the collateral behind what seemed to be named a stablecoin, XUSD? And the website literally just said, we run a number of strategies that involve XYZ. But no more than that in terms of transparency, and it turned out part of that was, off-chain lending to the tune of $93 million that went away. And so, was that clear to people depositing? I don't think so. And so if it's not clear to you as a curator, or in our case, when our curator brings an opportunity to us, yeah, you can't deploy to it. So you have to, really understand what is the collateral behind something. Is it a stablecoin backed by things like cash and treasuries, or is it a tokenized hedge fund that's running strategies? And are they strategies that you want to invest in? And I think as institutions get more sophisticated, they if it's a curator creating a vault for an institution, or us providing this sort of full service, more and more they're going to have a specific view on what they want, right? And it's either hand everything to the platform and the curator and say, you guys run with it, or it's we want to be very specific about the types of strategies we want. And I think that's going to evolve more and more as they get more evolved themselves.
Makes sense. To dive in a little bit more specifically into the context of stablecoins, I know Ben and Luca, you both operate platforms that are dependent on leveraging stablecoins and tokenized money market funds as collateral for them to operate. How do you think about stablecoin collateral management and underwriting, and how has the strategy been informed by your more institutional or enterprise-facing audience or clients?
Big question. So first of all, it's great to hear that we stop calling stablecoins something that is not. First of all, stablecoin is a terrible name, but we're stuck with terrible names in crypto. That's what it is. Like RWA. What the fuck is RWA? Sorry, but I've never heard of Bloombergized assets, and I worked in Wall Street for like 15 years. But I think we're starting to differentiate clearly what is actually a structured strategy and what is actually an M0, not M0 in the sense of the company, but like a risk-free type of infrastructure. This is a good start. We should stop using the name USD something even to label those, because it's mismarketing anyway. But people should get smart with their money. I think that, just to conclude as a segue, what I think is difficult in DeFi is that, go back to my hedge fund days, like there were ways you could actually create excessive spread yield above risk-free. You find different sources of yield and you lever them up. The problem of crypto is that the levering them up component is 99% of the extra yield. When you're creating a lot of back leverage on top of single sources of yield, it's very, very difficult to project what the systemic risk is going to be. It's like there's too much leverage in the system. This is like a 1000x system. Like banks are like 15x. So they're already complicated to manage. But on the stablecoin front, I think that we are going through the second phase of the stablecoin market, in my opinion. The stablecoin when it comes to institutions first started to say, okay, I want to have my own. I want to use stablecoins to move from fiat A to fiat B. And then say, okay, I want to use stable coins to move from fiat A to fiat B, but then I want to also make the money that Circle and Tether are making. And then step number 3, they're kind of now realizing that the reserve management, which is M0 Genius compliant type of reserve management, is stable stakes. it's very commoditized already. And what matters is the interop and the liquidity and how you can move in and out your own environment, which is what we're working on a lot. So I think that we're already starting to see significant commoditization in the reserve management part of the stack. It's like there is, Paxos started at the white label stablecoin journey, but now there is Bridge, there is Anchorage, there are like a long list of tokenized money market funds that are all kind of like plain vanilla. I saw recently BNY Mellon thinking about a stablecoin reserve management fund. These are money market funds with different flavors. So in my opinion, that is going to become commodity very quickly. Is going to be enough for some institutional players like fintechs that want to work within their walled gardens, but soon enough they will realize that what matters is how you connect the interop and liquidity in between systems, which is, I think, where the frontier of the stablecoin network war, so to say, is moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, everybody's making their own stablecoin. JP Morgan's going to have one, Bank of America, PayPal, thanks to Paxos. Money market funds are coming up, which are essentially stablecoins, right? They're all traded at $1, but they get around the Exchange Act to give yield. And so we make yield on the dollar, right? We need $1 on chain, but the government's not going to make their own dollar. So we have to make the decision: are we going to make our own dollar? Are we going to go to like an M0 or like a Paxos and ask us to make us our own dollar? Or do we lean into existing ecosystem that's building of like all these multinationals making their own dollars? Well, from our perspective, I think we should stop trusting developers to do what regulated TradFi institutions can do better. So like us as a project, we're very good at smart contracts. We have a lot of experience in smart contracts, more than any TradFi institution. So we're focusing on that, and we're delegating the collateral management to institutions that have been doing this for multiple years. Right? Like we accept, for example, Franklin Templeton's Benji as collateral, and they are a money market fund that's existed since the 80s and traded at NAV of $1 since the 80s. I think it's much safer than all these other combinations of collateral management that we see in stablecoins, whether it be off-chain loans, in the case of Stream, or obviously the worst, which is synthetic backings in the form of like maybe basis trading or over-collateralized lending.
Yeah. I want to take a little bit of a detour from the initial topic and talk a little bit about a new concept, relatively new, that we've been seeing a rise in DeFi recently, the concept of curation. For those that aren't aware, curation is basically the act of managing or deciding how assets are allocated between different protocols within usually vaults, but it can be done protocol-wide. Curation has been expanding recently as a way for us to effectively build out more, I'd say, customer or enterprise-friendly DeFi solutions for the enterprise and institutional market, basically simplifying a lot of these complex things that are happening at the blockchain level. I'm curious, and I have a specific question for each of you guys, from the perspective of your own company, how you think about this rise of curation, your role in it, and what that looks like for the future as more and more enterprises and institutions come into the market. So we'll start with Gytis. We know at MEV Capital, you mentioned at the top here, over $1 billion in assets managed. You're one of the first curators in DeFi. What was the reason that you started curating vaults in DeFi, and how are you thinking about expanding those capabilities or making those capabilities ready for the next, let's say 3 to 5 years as more enterprises and institutions come into the market?
So to answer the first part of the question, I think it was just a very natural transition because we had an on-chain only ethos from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So when the whole landscape of DeFi started changing towards the vaultification, if we can call it that, I think it was started by Morpho, right? And then for us, we were just at the right time and in the right place. So it was super easy to make that transition. Moreover, I think for all asset managers or risk curators, vaults are just a distribution channel to their strategies. I mean, some of them are kind of money market based, as Steve said before, and these liquid vaults or liquid yield vaults are essentially tokenized hedge funds, which allows anyone to get exposure to the strategies that are run by sophisticated actors in the market. In terms of where it's going, I think on the lending and borrowing side, we already see that institutions are like Revolut or Bitpanda and others are already integrating. So I think all of the, it's going to transition towards neobanks and other TradeFi institutions, which is already the case. On this kind of tokenized hedge funds, I'm still struggling to see whether it's going to be adopted, because if you're a large-scale institution, you can just run these strategies privately by having a relationship with the asset manager, rather entering into a public vault, right, where you kind of are in the same group with retail investors and other DeFi participants. So I'm not really seeing that it's going to be happening soon, but I think the future will show how it will end up.
Yeah. So to take that and go from the concept of managing curation to hosting curation, Steve, I'm curious how you think about your decision matrix around deciding which curators to work with. I think you already work with one now with the RETH Vault. How did that decision-making process go, and does that evolve at all as you scale or as you bring in more enterprise capital? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the customer, for one. Like, so, we launched with Rocket Pool, and they didn't have a pre-existing curator they wanted to work with, but they did have goals about what they wanted from the vault. So, one is give RETH holders like great risk-adjusted returns, but the other was to use the vault to further the reach of RETH in DeFi. So, in finding a curator, that was one of the goals we needed to ensure they were on board with, because it's harder to deploy today RETH than it is, say, staked ETH or ETH, just because it wasn't integrated in as many places. But with all of this capital pooled in a vault, we and our curator together can kind of throw our weight around and say, like, you want the liquidity, like, add support for this asset. And for some curators, they were really happy to be part of that process and part of that negotiation, not just allocating assets to protocols, but really like advocating for our asset. And so that took a bit of time to figure out who the sort of curators that were up for it, because it's maybe not bread and butter. And for that, we actually ran an RFP process. My co-founder and I have TradFi and technology backgrounds, and you're choosing a big important vendor, you run an RFP. And so we had our series of questions, and you learn a lot from that, right? You really get to know, like, how folks answer, but then with the follow-up questions, their approach. And I think at the time, Usual had just depegged, right? So we had this really good use case of like, were you guys exposed to Usual? And like how, like, if yes, how, like why? And if no, why not? And so yeah, we just got a really good sense of how folks approached risks during that process. And then the final one was, we were a startup, we were nimble, we wanted to move quickly. So we had this quite high baseline of what we needed in terms of sophistication from the curator, but they needed to be able to move quickly with us. And yeah, we ended up working with Chunda Capital out of the Netherlands. It's been a great partnership so far. Just to answer the final part of institutions, I think what happens is, institutions will get more sophisticated, as I said, and even today, they're just very different. Like, you can talk to for example, a distributed asset treasury that might have a team that know everything about public markets and raising capital and nothing about DeFi. And so they want the full handheld service. There'll be others that are quite sophisticated in DeFi and have in-house teams, but just want one part of their portfolio to be managed for them, because for whatever reason they don't want to do it. And a vault is a great interface to do that. So yeah, the types and varied classes of institution are wide. So it really depends on the customer.
Makes sense. I hinted and foreshadowed a little bit earlier about protocol-wide curation. So I'm going to turn that over to you, Ben. CAP itself is a protocol that curates the counterparties that can borrow liquidity and actually provide yield to the holders of its assets, CUSD. How do you think about creating guardrails for who can borrow that liquidity and curating that yield profile for the asset that represents the entire protocol of CAP?
Well, first, I think we would divide ourselves away from a lot of the yield space today, which are managed products. So you have either teams, DAOs, or committees, or curators themselves, underwriting strategies, underwriting credit, making decisions, humans making decisions. We are part of the list of protocols that believe in open market incentives and smart contract rules to enforce those market incentives. So I wouldn't say we curate anything, right? In fact, we're just a set of smart contract rules that our market actors have to abide by. And specifically, we built this private credit engine where those who make decisions have full downside of their decisions. So you put your ETH and you tell MEV now you can make yield the way that you might make yield, or Susquehanna now you can make yield the way you might make yield. But if they don't repay, if you make a mistake, you lose your ETH. And so tying the decision making to the downside of those decisions, I think is incredibly important, because today we have all these money managers in crypto that are essentially playing with people's money. And if they make a mistake, the users lose money, not the people playing with it. And I think that's really bad, because there's no recourse, right? There's no legal recourse, there's no regulations. And so to answer your question, the guardrails that we have are on-chain guarantees, right? They're not rules, they're not legal contracts, they're smart contracts that are just going to coldly enforce these parameters.
Makes sense. And Luca, you have a little bit of a different relationship with this kind of growing curator and DeFi ecosystem. As a stablecoin issuer, how do you think about your role with the DeFi ecosystem, especially within the context of these types of curated yield opportunities, and especially with the branded stablecoin product suite that you guys have recently launched? How do you see that interacting with that as you try to provide yield for some of these branded stablecoins moving forward?
Yeah. So first of all, M0 is not a stablecoin issuer. M0 is an infrastructure that wants to allow issuers, which in my opinion are going to become custodians, to actually connect with the world of developers that want to build stuff on top. So, which I guess is what you guys are doing, are starting to do at Paxos Labs. I think that, in my opinion, so first of all, I think as the guys were saying, is a natural evolution, what we're seeing with curation, because it's asset management when you have asset managers that are managing money for certain strategies. I also agree with the skepticism about institutions actually deploying through DeFi to access a market they already have access to, but I think probably this is evolving. But in my opinion, what we think the stablecoins are, and what we want to do as part of this ecosystem. I think that we think ultimately stablecoins are not a product. It's an infrastructure. It's a digital money infrastructure. As all digital money as a digital money infrastructure, it will connect any type of monetary use case, from payments to custody to savings and to investment management. So we think that we need high quality, risk-free, super safe, hyper liquid, in the sense that very liquid, infrastructure that moves things around. Now, we want to be the easiest injector of risk-free yield and liquidity for those people that are building products on top. So there are products that are built on top of M0, like USDAI, that is in no way a stablecoin. It is a synthetic private credit vehicle where the M0 piece of it is their on-chain current account, which is super safe. Now, in my opinion, we want to be like the base layer for all these type of products. There is obviously a connection with the lending markets, because I think the lending markets in certain iterations are very useful primitives, and I think these will merge. So in my opinion, we will have this base layer that intermediates payments, liquidity in between applications and the fiat rails. Then we will start having higher risk, higher yield, higher risk that can plug directly on this base layer. What things get complicated are on the experiments we've seen so far, where all these things are packaged in one box, and then you really don't know, right? And then you're marketing a fund as a base layer money infrastructure. and it creates a lot of confusion. But I'm very optimistic. Like, I've been in DeFi for a long time. I used to be a researcher before M0. I read a lot of paper, a lot of stuff before Terra, and quite a few blow-ups. I'm more optimistic because I really see how we are layering this infrastructure one piece at a time. I think that we will start seeing more interest from institutions when institutions will start to natively create yield sources on chain. And then this is the form factor. You don't need to go from like a real world asset into a tokenized assets and back. But I think we're getting there.
Yeah. I'm going to transition, because we're running a little bit low on time, to a quick rapid fire section. Going to have 3 different topics we're going to touch on. First is around DeFi adoption by the more enterprise institutional market. If you had to make one recommendation of a DeFi strategy that you would recommend to enterprise clients, what would that be? And what would be one you wouldn't recommend? Let's start all the way down. Ben.
A DeFi strategy.
Yes. It's called lending. You can even call it stablecoin yield, basis rate, you name it.
I think the only safe strategy in DeFi is called collateralized lending.
Gytis?
I would agree with Ben. Just maybe not what I recommend, but what I see is going to be interesting in the short term is, like, historically all of the lending in DeFi is variable rate, and now we're seeing some protocols and more for V2 launched a fixed rate product. So I think there's going to be a cool combination of 2 protocols. So it will be Pendle PTs leveraged in the fixed rate borrowing, and that would unlock a cool use case, I think, in the short term. I wouldn't recommend it as of right now, but I think it's something that it's going to be explored pretty wide on the DeFi landscape in the medium to short-term future.
There's no one-size-fits-all, but gun to my head, actually, I think incentive farming is one of the safest. VC money, it goes in cycles, but there's still a lot that comes into crypto, and it finances new projects, new chains, and you can get access to that just by participating. And so there's some risk, there's bridge risk, but in terms of being delta neutral, not being exposed to weird and wonderful collateral, not being exposed to other sort of borrowers and lenders, is actually a quite reliable way to generate market neutral returns.
Yeah, I agree with both sides. I think that if I had to manage money entirely in DeFi, I would probably dedicate it to over-collateralized lending on well-diversified and decentralized assets like BTC and ETH. I think it's a super safe way to create a reasonable spread over risk-free. You don't get rich with it, but that's why it's reasonable. And also, I think that providing liquidity for bootstrapping projects that give you like equity-like incentives, it's something that it will probably be appropriate. And then, every investment manager who invests in DeFi should do their own portfolio construction. But we should always remember that if we see the risk we are taking is directly proportional to the spread over the risk-free that we're seeing on the screens. We are not the smartest people in the room. If we're getting 20%, it's because there is a risk. There is 5 times we're gonna get wrecked. And I think good money managers, they know this as well.
Yeah. To turn it back to you, Luca, if you had to name one platform or protocol that, outside of your own, that you would entrust and recommend to enterprises, what would that platform or protocol be?
I think going back to what I was saying before, in my opinion, the 2 greatest innovations in DeFi so far have been decentralized exchanges and lending markets, and all the protocols that the OGs that have been playing here are great. I mean, Uniswap has been pioneering this space, and on the lending markets, the 3 big ones have very different approaches. Like Aave is more retail focused, Morpho, and I've been a friend of Paul and Merlin since the very beginning of the compound optimizer, and the guys are amazing. And also Euler, which is like somewhere in the middle. In my opinion, these 4 are like by far the best DeFi projects there are.
Steve?
Say Rocket Pool. Slightly talking my own book, but not my platform. But there are some reasons. So, number one, Staking is one of the safest returns you can generate in DeFi, right? So, and it's just staking. But also, like, if people are interacting in DeFi and on Ethereum, you're recognizing that one of the values of Ethereum is being credibly neutral. So, protocols that help keep it credibly neutral, like, that's what makes this whole thing work. And so, that's another reason why I say Rockpool.
Yeah, on my side, I have to completely agree with Luca. I think it's the lending protocols by far.
I would precise within lending protocols that open markets that use smart contract rules and not DAOs to rule their protocols are the best. That's why Morpho is probably the best lending market. In my opinion, that's what they want to choose.
Fantastic. And with that, we wrap up our panel for this morning. Thank you all for listening, and thank you guys for spending the time up here.